The ending of the bombing of Pan Am 103 is both emotionally devastating and deeply thought-provoking because it reminds viewers that even after decades of investigation, trials, and international negotiations, complete closure remained out of reach. Rather than ending with a triumphant courtroom victory, the miniseries focuses on the enormous human cost of the disaster and the reality that justice can sometimes be incomplete. By the final moments, the story has solved part of the mystery behind the bombing, but it also makes it clear that many questions continued to linger long after the verdict. The series begins by recreating one of the darkest days in aviation history. On the evening of December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 departs London carrying passengers eager to spend Christmas with their families in New York. At almost the same time, the Scottish town of Lockerbie is preparing for the holidays, completely unaware that tragedy is only minutes away. When the bomb hidden inside the aircraft explodes high above Scotland, the Boeing 747 breaks apart in midair. Burning wreckage falls across Lockerbie, destroying homes and killing people on the ground in addition to everyone aboard the aircraft. The miniseries does not present this moment simply as a disaster. Instead, it shows how thousands of ordinary lives changed forever within seconds. One of the central characters throughout the story is Detective Sergeant Ed McCusker, who is among the first emergency responders to reach the crash site. The destruction he witnesses immediately establishes the emotional tone of the series. This is no ordinary criminal investigation. It has become the largest crime scene in British history and one of the most complex terrorism investigations ever undertaken. Across the Atlantic, Federal Bureau of Investigation agent Dick Marquis is assigned to coordinate the American side of the investigation. From the beginning, he understands that solving the bombing will require complete cooperation between multiple countries and agencies. Unfortunately, that proves far more difficult than expected. The early episodes highlight one of the investigation's greatest obstacles. Evidence is spread across an enormous area, different agencies operate under different procedures, and communication problems constantly slow the investigation. Instead of portraying the investigators as flawless heroes, the series realistically shows how bureaucracy, politics, and international jurisdiction can delay even the most determined investigators. As investigators carefully reconstruct the aircraft from thousands of scattered fragments, they eventually confirm that the crash was not caused by mechanical failure. It was an act of terrorism. One of the most important breakthroughs comes from remarkably small pieces of evidence. Among the wreckage, investigators recover fragments of a radio cassette player that had been converted into a timed explosive device. While it may appear insignificant at first, this discovery becomes one of the foundations of the entire case because the design closely resembles devices previously connected to Libyan intelligence operations. The investigation gains even more momentum after burnt clothing fragments recovered from the suitcase carrying the bomb are traced back to a clothing shop in Malta. This seemingly ordinary purchase becomes one of the defining clues in the case. The shop owner, Tony Gauci, remembers selling an unusual collection of clothes to a Libyan customer who appeared strangely uninterested in sizes, prices, or matching outfits. At the time, the purchase seemed forgettable, but after investigators connect those clothes to the suitcase carrying the bomb, Gauci's testimony becomes one of the prosecution's strongest pieces of evidence. His description eventually points investigators toward Abdelbaset al Megrahi, an employee of Libyan Arab Airlines with links to Libyan intelligence. The investigation later reveals that Ahmed Abdussamad, another name appearing in earlier intelligence records, is actually one of Megrahi's aliases, strengthening the connection between him and previous intelligence activities. Another suspect, Lamin Khalifa Fima, also comes under suspicion after diary entries referencing airport baggage tags suggest he may have helped move an unaccompanied suitcase through Malta's Lucca airport. While those entries raise serious concerns, they never conclusively prove that he knowingly participated in the bombing itself. One of the strengths of the miniseries is that it never suggests solving such a crime happens quickly. Years pass with little visible progress. Political tensions grow as Libya refuses to surrender the suspects, creating an international standoff that lasts for years. Eventually, diplomatic negotiations produce an extraordinary compromise. Rather than holding the trial in either Britain or the United States, both suspects are transferred to Camp Zeist in the Netherlands, where a Scottish court operates on neutral ground. This unusual arrangement reflects how politically sensitive the case had become and how determined the involved governments were to move the prosecution forward. The courtroom sequences form the emotional climax of the series. The judges carefully examine every piece of evidence, including the recovered clothing, the fragments of the explosive device, the complicated movement of airline baggage, travel records, intelligence information, and Tony Gaussi's identification. After considering all the evidence, the court reaches two different conclusions. Abdelbaset al Megrahi is found guilty of 270 counts of murder, representing every person who lost their life in the attack. He receives a life sentence with a lengthy minimum prison term. Lamin Khalifa Fhimah, however, is acquitted. The court concludes that while there are suspicious circumstances surrounding him, the available evidence does not establish beyond reasonable doubt that he directly participated in the bombing conspiracy. This distinction is one of the most important aspects of the ending. The judges do not treat association as proof of guilt. Even in one of the world's most devastating terrorism cases, the court insists that each defendant must be judged according to the evidence presented against them individually. The ending becomes even more emotional as the series shifts away from legal arguments and focuses on what justice actually means. Through a combination of dramatized scenes and real footage from the trial, viewers are reminded that a conviction cannot undo the immense loss experienced by the victims' families. Hundreds of people are still gone, Lockerbie remains forever linked to tragedy, and the investigators themselves carry emotional scars that never fully disappear. The final title cards reveal that Megrahi's story did not end with his conviction. After being diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer, he was released from prison on compassionate grounds in 2009. His release generated enormous international controversy because many families believed he should have remained imprisoned for the rest of his life. Others argued that compassionate release reflected long-standing legal principles regardless of the crime committed. Megrahi returned to Libya, where he died in 2012. The series then reminds viewers that the investigation did not truly end there. Attention eventually shifted toward another Libyan suspect, Abu Aguila Masood, whom United States prosecutors allege built the bomb used in the attack and worked alongside Megrahi and Fhimah. Decades after the original trial, Masood was brought into United States custody and charged with crimes connected to the bombing. At the time represented in the series, he has pleaded not guilty and is still awaiting trial. This final revelation is significant because it shows that historical investigations often continue long after the public believes they are finished. Even decades later, investigators continued searching for everyone believed to have participated in the conspiracy. Beyond identifying suspects, the ending also examines the lasting impact the case had on those who devoted years of their lives to solving it. Ed McCusker eventually goes on to work with the United Nations, taking the lessons learned from Lockerbie into international peacekeeping efforts. Dick Marquise continues advocating for stronger cooperation between law enforcement agencies, believing that information sharing remains one of the greatest weapons against international terrorism. Catherine Turman later helps establish a stronger system of support for victims and their families through the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Office for Victim Assistance, ensuring that future investigations never overlook the emotional needs of survivors. These personal conclusions reinforce one of the series' central themes. While criminal investigations focus on identifying suspects and presenting evidence, they are ultimately about people. The detectives, investigators, emergency responders, and victims' families all continue living with the consequences long after media attention fades. The ending also highlights the enormous legacy of the Lockerbie bombing beyond the courtroom. The attack fundamentally changed aviation security around the world. Governments introduced stricter baggage screening, improved international intelligence cooperation, and strengthened airport security procedures designed to prevent another tragedy of this scale. Many of the security measures that modern travelers now consider routine trace part of their origin back to lessons learned after Pan Am Flight 103. Perhaps the most powerful message of the ending is that justice and truth are not always identical. The court reached a verdict based on the evidence available, but debates surrounding aspects of the investigation, witness testimony, and the wider conspiracy have continued for many years. The series does not attempt to resolve every controversy. Instead, it acknowledges that some historical events remain the subject of continuing discussion while still recognizing the immense work performed by investigators who spent years pursuing those responsible. Ultimately, the bombing of Pan Am 103 is not simply a courtroom drama or a story about terrorism. It is a deeply human account of loss, perseverance, and the extraordinary determination required to uncover the truth after one of the worst acts of aviation terrorism in history. Its ending reminds viewers that while convictions can provide a measure of accountability, they can never restore the lives that were lost. What remains is the responsibility to remember the victims, continue seeking the full truth wherever the evidence leads, and ensure that the lessons learned from Lockerbie continue protecting future generations.